Snowflake really plays that role in being that platform. We're groundbreaking technology with what we call the cross-cloud motionless data sharing. If you think about if someone asked me for some data a few years ago, I would email them a spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet. Well, the minute you do that, the spreadsheet gets out of sync, it breaks and things like that. So we've sort of revolutionized this idea of having data available where you don't have to move it around. So then you keep the security, the governance, and it's sort of motionless sharing, if you will.
Welcome to the Marketing Report, a podcast created for and by marketing professionals who seek to better understand their consumers and design unique, personalized experiences that stand out in today's market. In each episode, hosts from Verisk Marketing Solutions connect you to industry thought leaders, practitioners, and experts focused on improving B2C experiences through powerful data-driven insights. It's about how we connect with our consumers and where we can partner together to do it better. This is the Marketing Report.
Welcome to the Marketing Report podcast. I'm Tim Finnigan, and I work for Verisk Marketing Solutions, where I head up product marketing. And we're a division of Verisk, a data and analytics company. And what I do on this podcast, if you've never listened to it, is that I pull in as many subject matter experts and thought leaders in the data and analytics industry, and actually marketing industry, or any industry, and get their point of view on what's happening with not only their company, what's happening with their responsibilities, what's happening with the future of data, the future of marketing. So a little bit of everything. And today I'm excited to announce that I've got Kieran Kennedy, who's the head of Marketplace at Snowflake. Welcome to the podcast, Kieran.
Thanks, Tim. Good to see you.
The last time we saw each other, this hasn't been rehearsed. We were on stage together. We put on a conference called VIA. We did it a couple years ago in Philadelphia, and I had you on there. You did a really good job. But my thing that I remember is that you had an analogy of what data and wine and the parallel of those things. So could you tell us again what that means?
Yeah, sure. It's probably pretty worn out at this point. I tend to use that a lot, but yeah, I tend to think about, I've spent my whole life in the data business in some way, shape, or form, not my professional life, understandably. And what we talk about a lot, or what I talk about a lot, is data sitting. Again, the analogy to wine, as wine gets better with age, it gets better sitting in a cold, dark room. And that's the exact opposite of data. And data doesn't get better when it's sitting alone by itself in a cold, dark room. It's best when it's distributed. And the term we use at Snowflake a lot is when it's democratized. And I think that's something that so when I think about that, the way my brain works, I thought about wine and sitting in a cold room, maybe because I drink it too much, but that's where I came up with that. But yeah, I tend to think about that a lot.
Yeah. Is that your go-to intro?
It definitely is my go-to intro. Yes.
So Kieran, talking about Snowflake, I would love to now I know a little bit about Snowflake.
Yeah.
But if you could just tell everyone what you're responsible for at Snowflake and your vision of how Snowflake fits in the data marketplace.
Yeah. So really my role at Snowflake is in leading the marketplace. It's really from a business development standpoint. And really one of the things that we are aspiring is building the data cloud. And certainly there's an aspect of building this data cloud, which is companies sharing data within their organization. But then there's also the aspect of companies sharing data outside their company and with their customers, with their clients, and with their partners. And then there's this aspect of third-party content, which is I can enrich my own content with data that is outside my organization. And so from a marketplace perspective, what we're really trying to do is to create that ecosystem. And what myself and my team goes out and does is work with partners like Verisk in bringing on new unique data sets and applications and solutions that can enhance a customer's insights into their business and ultimately helping them grow their business. Snowflake really plays that role in being that platform. We really groundbreaking technology with what we call the cross-cloud motionless data sharing. If you think about if someone asked me for some data a few years ago, I would email them a spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet. The minute you do that, the spreadsheet gets out of sync, it breaks and things like that. So we've revolutionized this idea of having data available where you don't have to move it around. So then you keep the security, the governance, and it's motionless sharing, if you will.
So Kieran, on that topic, I saw a stat, I think Forrester put it out. It was almost 100%. It was like just under that they said that there's a large number of decision makers that want to expand their ability to use external data.
Yeah.
But silos get in the way, like AWS or Salesforce. Can you just talk about, isn't that one of your number one use cases of solving for that?
Yeah, it really is. And in a lot of senses, when you think about when people initially think about going to the cloud, they're like, oh, I can put information in AWS and GCP, but really you just took it and poured it from one bucket into another bucket. It's just one of them is available in the cloud, but you just went from silo to silo. And really what we're about is that semantical layer, if you will, that allows for the movement of data regardless of where you have it. So you can have it in AWS, you can have it in GCP, but you need that layer that allows you to seamlessly move it around. And one of the big things that what a lot of firms, a lot of companies are struggling with is how do I get new insights? If you look at people are really particularly post-COVID, to try and understand consumer behavior. And are people just ordering everything online, or are they going back out to stores, or is it a little bit of both? In order to understand that dynamic, you need data from a lot of different places. And if it's all disparate in different buckets, it makes it difficult to join it. And ultimately, our belief is that data joined is more insightful than individual data sets.
So Kieran, if I think about data 5 years ago, you had talked about it, traditional methods versus what we're doing now. Talk about what 5 years is going to look like for data and Snowflake. Think of that analogy where Wayne Gretzky talks about he doesn't go to where the puck is, he goes to where the puck's going.
Yeah. I think that one of the big trends that's going on is in a couple different markets is how do you retain that privacy and how do you retain that security around who I am as an individual. For example, we are spending a lot of time and effort in the clean room space. And how can I bring data together where I'm not exposing anything that is proprietary or anything that exposes an individual identity? And so we are seeing a lot that is just gaining momentum. And if you think about that environment, beyond just people data, if you think about, let's say, investment bankers who are working on a deal, they need to share data with the lawyers, the auditors, the companies involved in an acquisition. In doing that in a way that is privacy protective and security compliant is more and more important to our customers every day. And so we see an acceleration of that.
So the acceleration is like you just talked about the trends and what's going to be 5 years. What do you think about right now that businesses are concerned about? I've heard you talk about businesses are concerned about growing their business, and you have 3 ideas or 3 tenets that Snowflake has.
I think certainly, or we think, I shouldn't say we think certainly there's a lot of buzz around AI and ML, and what does that mean and how does that manifest itself? And our position is we can play a fundamental role in that, in the sense of what we fundamentally believe in is bringing work to the data instead of bringing data to work. Because once you move the data to address the work, that's when the breaks in the linkage happen. And so that's where, from our perspective, is how can we bring more work to the data where the data doesn't have to move? And that's where we think about, the second thing we really think about is, in order for you to have an AI strategy, you have to have a data strategy. And so it first comes with, you need to have data that is analytic ready in order for you to create LLMs and things like that. And the last piece of that is, one of our tenets is we're building the framework so that companies can then build those applications that they can make available to customers where the customer doesn't have to move the data. And that's our native application framework.
And that's a great segue because I wanted to ask you about this is that you had
Yeah.
mentioned our partnership and what we're doing and the native app. Can you just talk about the difference between the Snowflake Marketplace and the Snowflake native app?
Yeah, and really what's happened, Tim, over the last, since we've spoken, is we've really combined those. And when we were speaking even last year, it was referred to as the data marketplace, which was primarily comprised of essentially data sets and data solutions. It's now, we've essentially renamed it, if you will, and it's the marketplace where those applications are available on the marketplace. So the marketplace is now comprised of not only data sets, but those applications and connectors as well. So it's really broadening the scope of the marketplace is what we've done. So we don't position them or think about them separately. It's just a different kind of encounter, or how do you initiate a data conversation?
And Kieran, can you talk a little bit about identity resolution and the importance of it within, not only within Snowflake, but just within data itself?
Yeah, that's one of the primary use cases we see with our clean rooms is when our customers are thinking about identity resolution, they want to do it in a way where I can bring different sets of data into that clean room. The participants can't see exactly what the output is, and you only get the results that are unique to you. That's where we see that use case happening a lot. And then from there you get into hygiene, you get into customer segmentation and activation. But it really starts with the hygiene. How do I clean that up? And then you do the identity resolution, and then you go off into segmentation, activation, and measurement is what we're seeing.
Kieran, I know you've got sort of a big event coming up, Snowflake
Yeah.
Summit. What's that all about? And how do I get a ticket? That thing's the hardest thing to get a ticket for.
When you find out how to get a ticket, let me know, because I think they're harder to get internally here. But yeah, we're super excited. Coming up in San Francisco, June 3rd through the 7th will be the event, our annual client summit. And we are going to see, it is our big showcase to our customer as to where, not only what we're doing today, but also where we're going. And one of our themes this year is, I would say in the previous 2 years, we were doing a ton of work releasing new product into private preview and public preview. And the theme this year has been getting everything to GA. And so what you will see at Summit, if we're able to attend, is not only the vision of where we're going, but what is available today. Because I think one of the things that our customers are struggling with AI, but just in general in technology, is I need things that are available today. It's nice to know where you're going. That's great. That's awesome. So I can plan. But the big theme is making sure things are publicly available at that event. So you'll see a lot of that.
Kieran, it reminds me when you talk about things in GA, they want it right now, or they don't want to hear about, okay, great, that's a year from now. But I know you do a fair amount of traveling. When you sit down with different companies, besides maybe what you guys deal with, the data silos, what are some of these businesses coming back to you and say, hey, we're really struggling with this, or this is a hot topic for us? Is it all about acquiring new business, or is it a new tech stack? What are you hearing out in the marketplace that companies are really concerned about?
It's a great question. And the sort of gut reaction answer is it depends. It depends on the industry, the region, and things like that. But I think ultimately you've got a macro environment that has really changed in the last 4 years, which in many ways is led by what's gone on with interest rates. In that, with the rise of interest rates, companies are really looking at, I can go potentially buy $10 million worth of technology, or I don't really know where the puck's going, so I'm just going to park that money and let it earn 5% in a bank. And so we saw a lot of retrenchment in that front. So you see more cautiousness because of that, because they're like, before it was well, if I don't spend the $10 million, I'm going to lose it because of inflation. Now it's I can earn 5%, quite frankly, just doing cash management. So we saw more cautiousness. Now what we're seeing a lot of, though, is how do I tap into AI? What does that mean to my company, and how can I use it? Is it more than just using ChatGPT to help write an email? And that's the thing I think a lot of them are struggling with, where they all know they need to do. I haven't come up with a good metaphor yet, but it's like they know they need to do something. They're just not sure how and where.
Maybe we can think of a AI and wine.
Yeah. There's probably some corollary to that. Absolutely.
One of the sort of buzzwords that I've heard for the last couple of years, and you've said it a bunch, is data clean rooms.
Yeah.
Do people know what it is? Are we past that where you guys go into X business? You're like, hey, I'm Jim from Snowflake. Oh, yeah, I gotcha. Like they understand it. Or is there a fair amount of education still going on?
I think it depends on the industry. I think in the ad tech and MarTech space, they know what it is. When you talk about a clean room, they understand that. If you go into manufacturing, you say clean room and that, or DCR, if you, God forbid, you use a mnemonic, you'll get a bunch of blank stares. In finance and things like that, it's not well known, but they think about it from the standpoint of, again, we were using the example of working on a deal, is they don't view it as a clean room. They view it as a no access room or things like that. Yeah, I think in ad and MarTech and media and advertising, very well known. Outside that industry, I think we're still in the early stages of education.
And along that line, and what Snowflake can do, and we had talked about identity resolution, and you've got a pretty extensive background of working with data. And what made me think of this question is that you had talked about data foundation is important, and that's one of the things people are thinking about. Isn't that what they've been thinking about for the last 30 years? Is we need to make sure good data foundation. We need to know who the data. Why are we still trying to figure out what the answer is?
I think it's a great question. And yeah, we've been talking about this. The company I used to work for, FactSet Research System, used to tout itself by, the tagline used to be transforming information into intelligence. And how you did that was by combining data together. And I think you had the technological challenges to joining data. And now, because of the cloud, because of firms and the capabilities of Snowflake, you can now join it easier. You've solved for the technical part. And so now that opens you up to much more insights from different data sets. So now you're just trying to figure out, okay, what are those data sets that are going to give me that extra insight? And people talk about like alternative data and things like that. And I don't know, alternative data to me has always been data you just haven't seen before. But once you see it, it's not alternative anymore. But just the fact that you can include working with a company that's trying to figure out where to put the next store. And they're like, we want to include weather data. And before they could say they wanted to try to do that, but there was no actual way to join it. And now you can actually join it by either using lat longitude or IP addresses, things like that.
So one of the things that I know we're excited over at Verisk Marketing Solutions is the partnership with Snowflake, and especially how you bring in identity resolution and data. Can you just talk about the ease of use and our partnership?
Yeah, that's where, and again, I come from being a partner, so I got to be on that end of it to really see it. And I can say, working with a lot of the alphabet soup of different partnerships that are out there, the one that was most impactful was the Snowflake partnership. And part of that was because of the alignment in terms of objectives and incentives. And then the third was the not overly heavy sort of prescription around what the programs were, in really creating or thinking about them as a menu. Because what a customer wants to do is different. Some may say, look, I'm not interested in going to some new market. I want to meet my clients where they are. And so that go-to-market motion is very different from one where, hey, I've got a data set that I've sold into finance that I now want to sell into ad tech. Help me get there. They're very different programs. And I think that's where we've excelled in being flexible in that front. But I think it ultimately comes down to also, it's certainly thinking about you and Verisk as a partner and a customer, but more importantly, it's how do we think about your customer? And our focus needs to be on what is your customer's experience. And I think, again, from the standpoint of aligning objectives and incentives, I think that's the part that Snowflake does really well, is really understanding that, yes, you are our customer, but we really care about your customers as well.
And one of the things that we like is there's a lot of people using Snowflake. I think it was over 50,000 on average go to
Yeah,
Snowflake.
that's when you're thinking about the ecosystem, it's tapping into that ecosystem. And that's ultimately if you're thinking about your business and you're thinking about distribution, is you want to tap into an ecosystem where you're going to flourish and have, and so that's where, as we're constantly expanding, you being able to tap into that by default is something that's super valuable.
What are some other things in the future that Snowflake's working on that we had talked about general availability, but is there any cool things that are coming down the pike that you want to talk about?
Yeah, the things that we're most excited about is, even just yesterday, we announced to general availability is having Cortex. And so Cortex is a framework or the base foundational level of how we're approaching AI and building LLMs. And from that, we're also introducing a product line which we refer to as Arctic, keeping in the snow theme, if you will. And then that really is an open sourced LLM model. And so what we're really thinking about this is that there's an enormous amount of CapEx being spent right now. Our view is that the more that you can focus on the open source availability is the right thing for your customers and does it in a way that's cost effective. So that's where we're really thinking about, okay, great, there's all this buzz around AI and LLM, but it's how do you actually do it and how do you get customers started doing it in a cost efficient way? And that's where you'll see an enormous amount of focus for us.
Yeah, that's great. And just to give you a little commercial for Snowflake more, that's one of the things that we're really excited about is moving with Snowflake towards, like, we've got you all over our roadmap as far as that identity resolution piece. So you just don't go to Snowflake and just buy, you can buy our data sets there. We've got all these different demographics and different attributes. But the key for us is now the Snowflake native application where you can put your data in, get that identity resolution, and make those marketing campaigns and personalization. It's a great tool.
Yeah, and that's where when I'm talking at a high level, but then you get down into the various industry use cases, and particularly in media and advertising, it's focusing where you are going to see us continue to focus with clean rooms is on hygiene, identity resolution, customer segmentation, activation, and ultimately measurement. And that's where there's an enormous amount of focus on that front. And those are different within different industries, and that's where, as we focus on those industry solutions, is where you'll continue to see advancement.
Well, Kieran, I asked the two questions you wanted me to. I brought up the data and wine, and I brought up the hockey reference. I think we're about done. Kieran, thanks for joining the Marketing Report podcast. I really appreciate you joining.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Tim. It's great to see you. Hopefully see you in San Francisco, and appreciate the partnership.
All right. Thanks, Kieran.
All right. Be well.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Marketing Report. This show is brought to you by Verisk Marketing Solutions, an organization created to help CMOs and their partners improve the reach, timing, relevance, and compliance of every consumer engagement. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe to the Marketing Report wherever you get your podcasts, and check out the show notes for more information.